Some help for quadratic equations. Which of the following equations have a 0 at x equals 2? For it to have a 0 for that x value, all you have to do is plug in 2 for each of the x's in the equation, perform the order of operations, and simplify. And if you get 0, then x equals 2 is a 0 of the function. So let's check the first one. So y equals x squared minus 4. I replaced the x with 2. Now I need to simplify. 2 squared happens to be 4, so that turns into 4 minus 4. 4 minus 4 is 0, and that's true, so A is definitely one of them. B, plug in 2 for the x's, so 2 squared plus 4 times 2 minus 12. 2 squared is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 plus 8 is 12, 12 minus 12 is 0. That also works. Now for the third one, replace the 2's, or x's with 2's. So 2 squared minus 7 times 2 plus 8. 2 squared is 4. 7 times 2 is 14. So that's 4 minus 14 plus 8. 4 minus 14 is negative 10. Negative 10 plus 8 is negative 2. That's not 0. That one doesn't work. So just A and B have zeros at x equals 2. Given the equation 5 times 2x minus 8 times x plus 1 equals 0, the zero product property tells us that what? Well, the zero product property says if I'm multiplying things together and they equal 0, then each of those factors equals 0. So like x times x plus 2 equals 0. So either x equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. So all we have to do is 2x minus 8 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. And we use that same thing with the next couple. What are the zeros of the following functions? Function x squared plus 3x minus 10 or x squared minus 6x plus 8. Well, the first step is we factor. So here I put down 2 blank sets of parentheses, put an x up front in each, and then what can I multiply together to get negative 10? Well, I need a positive and a negative. Since I've got a positive and a negative, that means when I combine them, I'm looking at how far apart they are, because a positive plus a negative is going to be less than either one. So 1 and 10, that's 9 apart, so that doesn't work because I need them to be 3 apart. 2 and 5 work, so I know I need a 2 and a 5, and since it's a positive 3, that means it's a positive 5 and a negative 2. Then we set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. So x minus 2 equals 0 or x plus 5 equals 0. Add 2 on both sides for the first one, subtract 5 from both sides on the second one. So we get x equals 2 or x equals negative 5. Do the same on number 4. Put x up front in each, and then since it's a positive 8 but a negative 6, that means both factors have to be negative. The only factors of 8 that add up to 6 are 2 and 4. And so it's x minus 2 and x minus 4 are the factors. Set them each equal to 0 and solve for x. So add 2 to both sides on the first one, add 4 to both sides on the other one. So x equals 2 or x equals 4. Now, the next type, what are the solutions of the equation? Well, to get x by itself, we have to perform inverse operations. So right now, we have x minus 2 quantity squared. So squaring would be the first thing that we undo. And so we square root both sides. The left side just becomes x minus 2 because a square root cancels out a square. On the right side, 5's not a perfect square, but I do have to remember to put plus minus in front of the square root of 5 because there are always a positive or negative possible square root. And then add 2 to both sides. And so x equals 2 plus or minus root 5. And that's actually two answers. That's x equals 2 plus root 5, or that's x equals 2 minus root 5. And we kind of work similar. If we're completing the square, we take the number in front of the x, in this case a negative 2, and divide it by 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and we square it. Negative 1 squared is 1. So you would add 1 to both sides to complete the square. Now on 7, it's asking us what would be the next step after that, after we figure out what we add to both sides. So in this case, negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. That squared is 16. So we're going to add 16 to both sides. 6 plus 16 is 22, so that means our answer is A or B. And what we got there is right there, -4 squared. That -4 tells me what's going to be inside the parentheses with x. So x minus 4 quantity squared equals 6 plus 16. So x minus 4 quantity squared equals 22. So the answer is B. Now the last couple, solving for a particular variable. First one, we want to take the equation v is equal to the square root of g times h, and we want to solve for g. So the first thing, we got to get rid of, we want g by itself, so we have to undo the operations that's happening with it. We've got g times h and the square root of that. The last thing we've got is square root, so we square both sides. That gets us v squared equals g times h. How do we undo multiplying by h? Divide both sides by h. And so v squared divided by h will be equal to g. 9's kind of asking the same thing, except asks us to remember the Pythagorean theorem. Well, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Take the two legs, square them, add them together, you'll equal the hypotenuse squared. But we want to, what does b equal in terms of c and a? So that means we want to solve for b. So first off, subtract a squared from both sides. Then square root both sides. And whenever you square root, remember there's always two possible answers. B equals plus or minus the square root of c squared minus a squared. But there's an issue with that because we're talking about the legs of a triangle. Can you have a negative distance? Not in this case. So that means we would just do the positive square root. And so our answer B equals positive square root of c squared minus a squared. Now go through, do the diagnostic, and then once you pass it, ask to take the assessment.